As the days passed, the mystery of the boy's taped shoes grew. She decided to be a bit more observant. She noticed how he always looked around cautiously before entering and leaving the restaurant. There was never any adult supervision. Although they had seen him there before, there was a nervousness in his demeanor that hadn't been obvious before. It was too late for a boy of his age to be walking alone at night. 8-year-old Timmy walked into the bustling restaurant in Green Downs, Ohio, his shoes making barely a sound on the tiled floor. The place was alive with the chatter of patrons and the clinking of cutlery. He made his way to the counter, his eyes shining with a peculiar enthusiasm. "Hey there, Timmy," called out Cindy, the waitress who had come to recognize him over the past few weeks. "The usual?" "Yes, please," Timmy replied with a shy smile. He handed over 2 crumpled dollar bills, which Cindy accepted with a friendly nod. She had no clue what the boy was really up to. Timmy fished out a crumpled bill from his pocket and handed it to her. "Thank you," he said softly. She scooped a generous portion of peanuts into a small paper bag, handing it to him with a wink. "Here you go. Enjoy." Perhaps it was because she was working there for years that he felt safe talking to her. She was a regular face at the diner, but she should have been wearier. Timmy was a young boy with a quiet demeanor, and he began frequenting the small, cozy restaurant on Maple Street every day. He would always order peanuts. The first time he did, the staff thought it was just a simple preference. They gave him a large quantity for $2, and he would sit in the corner, munching away, and then carefully packing the rest to take home. Timmy took the bag and shuffled to a quiet corner of the restaurant. He cracked open a peanut, savoring the taste. The salty flavor was comforting, and he liked the way the shells felt in his hands. The boy settled into his favorite booth, peeling off the shell of a peanut and popping the kernel into his mouth. The routine was the same every day. He'd eat a few peanuts, savoring each one, and then stash the rest into his backpack. He always ate a few handfuls and then carefully wrapped up the rest to take home. Over time, the staff grew accustomed to his daily visits. They even began to expect him at around the same time, each afternoon. "There he is, our peanut lover," joked Tony, the cook, one afternoon as Timmy entered. It wasn't until a particularly busy Friday that things took a turn. A regular customer, an elderly man named Mr. Jenkins, had been observing Timmy for a while. As Timmy stood at the counter paying for his peanuts, Mr. Jenkins leaned over to Cindy. He pointed to the little boy sitting alone. The curious waitress looked up. "Have you ever noticed that boy's shoes?" Mr. Jenkins whispered. They didn't realize then what the boy was really doing. Cindy looked down, for the first time really noticing Timmy's footwear. Her eyes grew wide in shock as she saw the condition of his shoes. They were old, worn sneakers, but what caught her eye was the tape, clear Scotch tape wrapped around the soles, holding them together. She was busy with orders, but tried to make conversation with Mr. Jenkins. "I hadn't," she murmured. "I wonder what that's about." But they had no idea how much worse things were going to get. Cindy laughed with Mr. Jenkins. "It's really not funny, Jenky. I've seen him here before." She told him the strange story about the peanuts. Mr. Jenkins frowned. "Seems odd, don't you think? Why would someone tape their shoes like that?" The two gossiped amongst themselves. Cindy shrugged, handing a customer his order. She watched him return to his booth. Maybe he can't afford new ones. But they didn't realize what little Timmy's story really was. Cindy and Mr. Jenkins took a special interest in Timmy. At first, the staff thought he just really loved peanuts. It wasn't unusual for a kid to have a favorite snack. But Timmy's routine never changed. He ate alone, spoke very little, and always took some peanuts home. No one thought much of it until one day, regular customer Mr. Jenkins noticed something peculiar. They realized that there was something suspicious about his behavior. "Hey, Cindy," Mr. Jenkins whispered as he leaned over the counter, nodding towards Timmy. "It's the same shoes as before." He looked guilty as he spoke. "You see his shoes? He's got tape wrapped around them." The two realized that it was probably the only pair of shoes the boy had. Cindy glanced over and saw the tape for the first time. It was odd, but she shrugged it off. "Kids do the strangest things," she replied, trying to be nonchalant. Over the next few days, the tape on Timmy's shoes became a topic of quiet discussion among the staff. Other people started to notice him. "It's strange," said Rosa, another waitress. "He always pays for his peanuts and never asks for anything else. Why wouldn't he save up for new shoes?" Tony suggested, Maybe the peanuts mean something more to him than just a snack. The restaurant staff were intrigued by the strange boy and his bi-weekly peanut order. Cindy pondered this as she watched Timmy one afternoon. He was methodical, almost ritualistic in his peanut consumption. It was as if each peanut held a secret significance. "Do you think we should ask him?" she wondered aloud. She had a child of her own, so she was concerned. Rosa shook her head. "He seems like a private kid. We don't want to scare him off." But Cindy felt sorry for the boy, and she intended on finding out where he was coming from. One particularly rainy day, Timmy arrived looking more disheveled than usual. His hair was wet, and his clothes clung to him from the downpour. Cindy handed him his peanuts, and as he turned to go to his booth, she couldn't help but ask, "Are you okay, Timmy?" He looked at her, surprised. "Yes, I'm fine. Just got caught in the rain." "Do you have somewhere dry to go?" She pressed gently. Timmy hesitated, then nodded quickly. "Yes, I do. Thanks." Cindy watched him go, her concern growing. That evening, as the restaurant was closing, she brought up her worries to Tony. "There's something more to that boy. I think he might be in trouble." Tony frowned. "What do you want to do? We can't exactly interrogate him." They knew they would get into trouble for talking to customers. But this was a special exception. "Maybe we can just keep an eye out," Cindy suggested. "Make sure he's safe." At first, the waitstaff simply found his routine endearing. He was polite, never causing any trouble, and though he never came in with anyone, he seemed okay. Timmy would always smile and say thank you, leaving a small part of his pocket money on the table as a tip. Timmy, oblivious to their conversation, continued to eat his peanuts. He chewed slowly, savoring each bite. His eyes were downcast, his face pale and drawn. The doorbell chimed again, and Officer Reynolds stepped into the diner. Officer Reynolds was a familiar figure around town, known for his calm demeanor and sharp eyes. He was an officer for over 15 years now and cared deeply for the town of Greendowns. He scanned the room, his gaze landing on Timmy. Something about the boy's appearance struck him as off. The dark circles under his eyes, the disheveled hair, and the unmistakable signs of tears recently shed. He wanted to call it in, but he needed more information first. "Afternoon, folks." Officer Reynolds greeted the room, but his focus remained on Timmy. He approached the counter, stopping beside the boy. "Hey there, buddy. Mind if I sit?" he asked gently. Timmy looked up, startled, but nodded. "Sure." Officer Reynolds took a seat and ordered a coffee. "I've seen you around here a lot. You like peanuts, huh?" Timmy nodded, his eyes wary. "Yeah, they're my favorite." The officer took a sip of his coffee, trying to keep the conversation light. "You always come here alone?" Timmy hesitated, then nodded again. "Yeah, I live a few streets down." Officer Reynolds noticed the tremble in Timmy's voice and the way he kept his eyes lowered. "Where's your family, Timmy?" "My mom's at home," Timmy whispered. "She's sick, and my dad, he's not around much." Cindy, who had been listening from the other end of the counter, felt a pang of concern. She walked over and placed a gentle hand on Timmy's shoulder. "Is there anything we can do to help, honey?" Timmy shook his head, tears welling up in his eyes. "No, I'm okay. I just came here to get some food. Mom gives me money." She had a feeling that he wasn't telling them everything. The officer's face softened. He took out his radio and quietly called for backup, explaining the situation to his colleagues. "Timmy, would you mind if we went to your house? Maybe we can help your mom." Timmy looked terrified at the suggestion. "I don't want to get in trouble. Mom says we're fine." "You're not in trouble, Timmy," Officer Reynolds assured him. "We just want to make sure you and your mom are okay." After a moment of silence, Timmy nodded reluctantly. "Okay, but not today." Cindy packed up the remaining peanuts for Timmy, handing the bag to him with a reassuring smile. "We'll be here if you need anything, sweetie." Officer Reynolds stood and placed a gentle hand on Timmy's back, guiding him out of the diner. As they walked, he kept the conversation going, trying to ease the boy's nerves. "So, what's your favorite subject in school?" he asked. Timmy shrugged. "I like math, I guess." "That's great. I was terrible at math when I was your age," the officer said with a chuckle. Suddenly, something came over Timmy. He got very skittish and told the officer that he needed to go. Officer Reynolds was surprised. He wanted to go after the boy, but he couldn't. "Hey, why are you running away?" he yelled after him. He knew that he couldn't take the initiative without something being actually wrong. He watched Timmy run down the street. He secretly hoped that he would see him again. A few days later, another customer noticed something unusual. Timmy had tape on his shoes. It was peculiar, as if his shoes were falling apart and the tape was holding them together. This observation stuck with the customer, who mentioned it to the restaurant staff. They had noticed it before and knew it was time to act. Just then, Officer Reynolds walked in. He was there for a quick lunch, but spotted Timmy sitting alone, tears streaking his cheeks. The boy tried to hide his crying, but it was evident to the officer. The sight was heart-wrenching. The officer, with a soft demeanor, approached Timmy. "Hey there, buddy. Are you okay?" he asked gently. Timmy nodded but avoided eye contact, looking down at his shoes instead. "Do you mind if I sit with you for a moment? Do you remember me?" the officer continued. Timmy shrugged, not wanting to get into trouble. The officer took a seat and offered a reassuring smile. "You seem a bit upset. Is there something you want to talk about?" But he wasn't ready for what Timmy was going to tell him. The officer signaled for Cindy to come over. Perhaps having a familiar face nearby would make it easier for him to talk. Cindy put her hand up, signaling that he should be gentle with the boy. She finished up her order and walked over to their table. As she approached him, she smiled warmly. He looked at her with a tear-stricken face and gave her a weak smile. Would they be able to help him without scaring him off? Officer Reynolds wanted to talk to Timmy before calling in backup. He had dealt with domestic family abuse before, and he knew the signs. He glanced over and saw Timmy sitting alone, a faint look of distress on his young face. He seemed to have been crying. The kind officer and waitress notified the other staff that they were going to help Timmy. It was always a sensitive case helping unsupervised children. Where were his parents? Concerned, Officer Reynolds approached Timmy. "Hey there, buddy. Everything okay?" he asked gently. Timmy looked up, his eyes wide and filled with fear. He nodded, but didn't say anything. Officer Reynolds called in the situation, requesting backup. The restaurant fell silent as everyone watched the scene unfold. Cindy brought over another bowl of peanuts, hoping to comfort Timmy. "What happened, son?" Officer Reynolds asked softly. But he was too traumatized to talk. The little boy gobbled the peanuts up with both hands. "I'm hungry," he replied in a small voice. "I live a few streets down." Cindy felt sorry for him and asked the chef to make him a sandwich. "Why do you come here alone every day?" the officer inquired. Timmy hesitated before answering. "There's no food at home. My mom is sick, and my dad, he's never around. She gives me money to buy food, and I like peanuts." The room was silent, the weight of Timmy's words hanging heavily in the air. Officer Reynolds' heart ached for the boy. He signaled to his partner, who had just arrived, and they decided to follow Timmy home to assess the situation. The female officer tried to comfort the sad child. After a moment of hesitation, Timmy spoke. "I live a few streets down. There's no food at home. My mom is sick, and my dad, he's never home." Would they be able to help him? The officer's heart sank. Cindy was invested and started explaining the situation to the female officer. Soon, another officer arrived, and together they coaxed Timmy to show them where he lived. The boy reluctantly agreed, and they walked to his apartment. It was a few streets down and at the edge of the industrial area. Timmy led them to a rundown apartment building a few blocks away. The officers were shocked to see the condition that the boy was living in, but they had no idea how much worse things were for him. They entered Timmy's house, a small, rundown building at the end of a quiet street. The windows were dark, and the front yard was overgrown with weeds. Timmy led Officer Reynolds inside, calling out for his mother. The hallways were dimly lit, and the air was thick with neglect. He stopped at the door and pushed it open. Inside, they found a small, cluttered apartment. In the corner, on a worn-out couch, lay a woman, pale and frail. What had the officers just walked into? Officer Reynolds stood at the threshold, his flashlight casting a stark, unwavering beam into the gloom of the dilapidated house. He hesitated, taking in the scene before him. The front door creaked ominously as it swung open wider, revealing the full extent of the neglect. Paint peeled from the walls in long, curling strips, and the air was thick with the musty scent of decay. It was hard to imagine that this place had once been a home filled with life and laughter. Now it was a husk, an echo of better days long past. As he stepped inside, the floorboards groaned under his weight, protesting the intrusion. Dust motes danced in the air, stirred by his movement, and settled again like a blanket over everything. The wallpaper, once likely vibrant and cheerful, now hung in tatters, stained with years of grime and water damage. Officer Reynolds had seen his share of neglected properties, but this one was in a league of its own. The sheer abandonment was palpable, seeping into his bones and making him shiver despite the warmth of the evening. His eyes adjusted to the dim light, and he noticed the scurrying forms of rats darting across the floor. They moved in quick, furtive motions, their presence adding to the eerie atmosphere. One particularly bold rat paused in the middle of the room, its beady eyes reflecting the beam of his flashlight, before disappearing into a hole in the wall. Reynolds grimaced, swallowing back a wave of nausea. The infestation was severe, a testament to how long the house had been left to deteriorate. Officer Reynolds steeled himself and ventured deeper into the house, the beam of his flashlight sweeping over the disarrayed furniture. He noted the sagging couch in the living room, its upholstery torn and springs protruding like broken ribs. The floor was littered with debris, old newspapers, food wrappers, and what looked like the remnants of a shattered vase. Every step he took kicked up more dust, making him cough and cover his mouth with his sleeve. The officer's light passed over the walls, and he saw the unmistakable skittering of cockroaches. They crawled with unsettling speed, retreating into cracks and crevices as the beam of light hit them. The sight of the insects made his skin crawl, and he reflexively brushed at his uniform as if to shake them off. He had been warned about the state of the house, but nothing had prepared him for this level of squalor. It was a wonder the structure was still standing at all. In the kitchen, the decay was even more pronounced. Cabinet doors hung askew, their contents spilled out and moldering on the countertops. The sink was filled with stagnant water, its surface a grimy film that suggested it had been sitting there for months. More rats scurried away as he approached, vanishing into the dark recesses beneath the sink. The refrigerator door hung open, revealing mold-encrusted shelves and a rancid smell that made Officer Reynolds gag. He quickly moved away, not wanting to linger in the fetid space any longer than necessary. As he made his way towards the back of the house, he noticed a staircase leading to the second floor. The steps were covered in dust and debris, but they appeared sturdy enough to hold his weight. He carefully ascended, each creak of the wood beneath his boots echoing in the stillness. The second floor was no better than the first. The hallway was narrow and cluttered with discarded items, broken picture frames, clothes strewn about, and more evidence of the rodent infestation. It was clear that no one had lived here for a long time, and yet there was an unsettling sense that the house had a story to tell, one of abandonment and lost memories. Finally, Officer Reynolds reached the end of the hallway and stood before a closed door. He hesitated, his hand on the knob, wondering what he would find on the other side. The house had already shown him so much neglect and decay, yet he felt a compulsion to see it through, to understand the full extent of the desolation. Taking a deep breath, he turned the knob and pushed the door open, readying himself for whatever lay beyond. Timmy led Officer Reynolds into the room. "My mom is in here, officer." He dropped his packet of peanuts on the table. "Mom, I'm home." A weak voice responded from the bedroom. "Timmy, is that you?" They found Mrs. Thompson lying in bed, looking pale and frail. Her eyes widened when she saw Officer Reynolds. The officer assured her to remain calm. "We're just here to help, ma'am," he tried to convince her. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice shaky. But she didn't know what her son had done. Timmy's mother looked very weak. To Officer Reynolds, she looked like she needed to be in a hospital instead of lying on that filthy-looking bed. Her eyes were sunken on her face, and anyone could see that she was in very bad shape. She had a really nasty cough. The room smelled musty, and there was no open window to let in some fresh air or sunlight. Once again, there were cockroaches everywhere, and this was not a good sight. He felt so sorry for the two of them. How could a young boy like Timmy possibly be left to look after not only himself, but his ailing mother? It was a heartbreaking situation. Officer Reynolds had seen many such cases in the years that he was a police officer, but this was by far the worst. All he could think about now was helping mother and son. He needed to get Timmy's mother to a hospital, and then he wanted to get them out of this decrepit house. Timmy brought the officer forward. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Reynolds. Timmy's been coming to the diner for food. We're just here to make sure you're both okay." Mrs. Thompson sighed, her eyes filling with tears. I've been sick for a while. It's been hard to take care of things. Mom, are you okay? Timmy said quietly, sitting next to her and holding her hand. The officers approached cautiously. It was a sensitive situation. Ma'am, we're here to help, Officer Daniels said softly. The woman opened her eyes weakly and tried to sit up. My name is Officer Daniels, and this is my partner, Officer Reynolds. She nodded slightly. I'm sorry, it's been tough, she whispered. Timmy's father left months ago, and I've been too sick to work. Timmy's been so brave, trying to take care of us both. Officer Daniels looked around the apartment and saw the sparse cupboards and the evident signs of struggle. We're going to get you some help, she promised. The officers immediately called for medical assistance. As they waited, one of them sat with Timmy, trying to keep him calm. Officer Daniels discovered that Mrs. Thompson had recently lost her job as a receptionist because she was taking too much time off work. I didn't ask to get sick, she said sarcastically. They called for medical assistance, and soon an ambulance arrived to take Timmy's mother to the hospital. But were the mother and son going to be okay? Officer Reynolds nodded to Officer Daniels and then turned back to Mrs. Thompson. We need to get you to a hospital, he said gently but firmly. You need medical attention, and Timmy needs proper care too. Mrs. Thompson started to protest, but her coughing fit made it clear she could barely take care of herself, let alone her son. I don't want to be a burden, she murmured between coughs. Reynolds shook his head. You're not a burden. We'll make sure you're both taken care of. He radioed for an ambulance, explaining the urgency of the situation. Help is on the way, he reassured her. As they waited for the ambulance, Cindy arrived with a bag of fresh food from the diner, her eyes brimming with tears at the sight of the struggling family. She handed the bag to Timmy, who looked at her with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. We're going to help you and your mom, Timmy, Cindy said softly, ruffling his hair. She looked around the apartment, her heart aching at the conditions they were living in. You're a brave boy, taking care of your mom like this. Timmy nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. I just want her to get better, he whispered. Cindy hugged him gently, trying to comfort him as best as she could. Timmy sat beside his mother, clutching her frail hand as tears streamed down his face. He felt a heavy weight of guilt pressing down on him. Mom, I'm so sorry, he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. I should have bought proper food. I didn't know what to do. His mind raced with memories of the past few months of coming home with only peanuts while his mother grew weaker and weaker. He blamed himself for not being able to take care of her properly, for not understanding the gravity of her condition sooner. Mrs. Thompson squeezed his hand weakly, her eyes filled with love and sorrow. Timmy, it's not your fault, she said softly, her voice barely audible. You've been so brave, doing the best you can. I'm proud of you. But Timmy couldn't shake the feeling of responsibility. He looked around the dilapidated room, the decay and neglect a stark reminder of their dire situation. I should have known better, Mom, he murmured. I should have taken better care of you. His heart ached with regret, wishing he had done more to help her. Officer Reynolds, witnessing the exchange, felt a surge of empathy for the boy. He knelt beside Timmy, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Timmy, you've done more than any child your age should ever have to do, he said gently. None of this is your fault. You did what you could with what you had. Timmy looked up at him, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope. We're going to make sure you and your mom get the help you need, the officer continued. You both deserve a chance to get better, to have a safe place to live and proper food to eat. When the paramedics arrived, they assessed Timmy's mother and began providing the care she desperately needed. The officer who had first approached Timmy stayed with the boy, ensuring he wasn't too frightened by the commotion. In the midst of everything, the officer asked Timmy about his love for peanuts. Timmy glanced at his mother, then back at the officer. My dad told me that if I ate peanuts, I'd become a strong man. I thought maybe if I got strong enough, he'd come back. The officer's eyes softened. He looked at Timmy's mother, who was now receiving IV fluids. Timmy's innocence was heartbreaking. She managed a weak smile and nodded. His father used to say that all the time, but he left us a while ago, and I've been struggling to keep us afloat ever since. The officer felt a pang of empathy. He turned to his colleague. Let's get this kid some new shoes. At that moment, they didn't realize what a big impact they made on the boy's life. Later that day, after ensuring Timmy's mother was on her way to recovery, the officers took Timmy to a nearby store. They picked out a sturdy pair of shoes, ones that wouldn't need tape to stay together. Timmy's eyes lit up, a rare smile breaking through his usually serious demeanor. Timmy had never owned a pair of name-brand sneakers before. "Thank you," he said quietly as they left the store. The officers knew that the small gift made a huge difference to the little boy. Officer Daniels felt a lump in his throat. She knelt beside Timmy, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Your dad was wrong to leave, Timmy, but we're going to make sure you and your mom are okay." Timmy put his arms around the female officer and hugged her close. She couldn't help but tear at the kindness and innocence of the boy. Together, they took Timmy back to his mother in the hospital. There he waited while his mother was diagnosed with a rare blood disease. Officer Daniels stayed with Timmy while his mother received emergency treatment. They were liaising with social services to find out what was the best option for little Timmy. Mrs. Thompson overheard the discussion and screamed at the officer. "Don't you take my son away from me," she yelled at him. It became evident that she didn't want to get the authorities involved because she was afraid that they would find her incapable of raising her son. But would they take her side? Back at the restaurant, the staff had heard about Timmy's situation. Cindy spoke up. "We let him pay for peanuts whenever he comes here, guys. We have to help." They started a small fund to help his family, contributing from their own pockets. In 2 weeks, they had collected over $2,000. When Timmy next came in for his peanuts, they handed him the bag along with an envelope. Timmy had no idea that his life was going to change forever. The little boy was excited. "What's this?" Timmy asked, puzzled. "Just a little something to help you and your mom," one of the staff members said gently. Timmy opened the envelope and found a collection of bills. His eyes widened in shock. "I can't take this," he whispered, looking up at the kind faces around him. "Yes, you can," the staff member insisted. "And you will. We care about you, Timmy." But would Timmy accept the stranger's help? Tears filled Timmy's eyes again, but this time they were tears of gratitude. He nodded, clutching the envelope tightly. The authorities decided to let Timmy stay with his mother on condition that she find a job soon. As weeks passed, the officers regularly checked in on Timmy and his mother. She was slowly getting better, and Timmy started looking happier. His new shoes no longer had tape, and he walked with a bit more confidence. The officer who first spotted Timmy often visited the restaurant, making sure the boy was doing well. One day, he brought a small gift for Timmy, a book about strong men and heroes. Timmy's eyes shone as he accepted it. "Remember," the officer said, "strength isn't just about muscles. It's about heart, too, and you've got plenty of that." Timmy smiled a genuine, bright smile. For the first time in a long while, he felt hopeful. The support from the officers, the restaurant staff, and the community gave him and his mother a new sense of belonging and security. The officers continued to help Timmy's mother, ensuring she had access to the medical care and resources she needed. Slowly but surely, their situation improved. Timmy still loved his peanuts, but now they were a treat shared in a home filled with warmth and hope. Over the next few days, the community rallied together. The restaurant staff collected donations, and Cindy made sure Timmy and his mother had plenty of food. They arranged for social services to step in and provide the necessary support. Timmy's mother received the medical care she needed, and gradually her health began to improve. She even found a job as a waitress in the same restaurant. Timmy returned to the restaurant, but now he came with a smile that reached his eyes, and with friends who accompanied him. He still ordered peanuts, but now he shared them with the other kids, laughing and playing. Months later, the officer received a letter from Timmy. It was simple, but heartfelt. "Thank you for helping me and my mom. We're doing much better now. I want to be like you when I grow up, a hero,